this will be a brisk walk because we have 1 hour time and I will try to adhere to time. We are starting like 10-15 minutes late, so it's okay. So we'll adjust. Um, so in this presentation, I'll have two distinct parts. In the first part, I'll be talking about the conducting research part, and the other part, I'll be talking about uh, publishing. So in the first part, first we will talk about how to identify a problem. Here I'm talking about a research problem. And then considering solutions, because when we are talking about problem, we are also talking about solutions. So we'll be talking about solutions. And then next one, we'll be talking about conducting research, how to conduct research. A few things we'll discuss. It won't be in detail, so I will not be able to give details about how to conduct research, but because this is because time is a constraint here. The next we will, in the publication part, first we will talk about how to prepare for a good publication, how to get ready. The next is how to identify appropriate journals. And then finally, one very important thing is how to face submission issues and how to face rejection issues, because these are two things which generally after you face these issues, generally people give up. People feel discouraged to think about research and publishing. And in the process of doing so, I'll try to break a few stereotypes which have been constructed around uh, conducting and publishing research, and a few things which the faster the we avoid, the better it is for all of us. Um, because as a community, we are facing this trouble. So, sorry, I will admit two people and then. Sorry. Okay. I will keep coming back to admitting people once in like 15-20 minutes. Before that, I'll stay here because people have not joined on time. So, this is not a problem. And this platform doesn't allow anybody else to be the joint owner. So, I don't know how to do this. This is the first time I'm doing this. So, I'm really sorry if there is technical disturbance and some kind. And but I'm happy that it's streaming on YouTube. So when we talk about identifying a problem, we are talking about uh, let's begin with this thing. Okay. uh, when we are talking about identifying a problem, I'm talking about a classroom problem, and by classroom I mean your own classroom. Okay, the classroom in which you are teaching. So I started with Aristotle because of that, because it's important to begin with what you have at your disposal, and it's better to reflect on what you are doing in your classroom. So, in the same direction, if you think identifying a problem here, because we are talking about teacher research, we are talking about research conducted by teachers, mainly teachers. Like we, all of us, we are teachers. We are not pure researchers. I don't know if there is a pure researcher here who doesn't teach at all, but all of us, we teach language. So that's why I said teacher research. And in the last webinar which I conducted for, I think, English Language Teachers Association Telangana, I try to break this barrier or this boundary between teacher research and academic research. I feel that if keep pursuing teacher research, keep doing teacher research and publishing your research, then at some point you will realize that you are getting into academic research, because academic research is about sophistication, adding more sophistication to your uh, uh, you know to your identification of problem, to your methodology, to your data analysis, to your writing, and all those things. So they get sophisticated. So it's just a degree, it's a variation in terms of degree. I don't think that teacher academic research is very different. It is generally lot of academic research is conducted in classrooms, and are relate a lot of academic research you will find data is collected from classrooms. So it's possible to use classroom as a foundation. I'm not saying that there is no research outside classroom. There can be a lot of research outside classroom, but a lot of research inside classroom. So if you are an academic researcher who is working on classroom, still you are an academic researcher and working on classroom. So I try to break that barrier in my last webinar. So taking it from there and saying that when you're talking about identifying a problem, we are talking about a problem, identifying a problem in the classroom. And when we talk about classroom, I'm talking about three aspects. When we talk about problems, there are three aspects. First is as a teacher, you may face something like a problem which you need to address or you need to solve. Then experimenting with something new, which may have to do with something innovative, something that you have never used, something that is fresh inside your head, and nobody has ever experimented with it, or you people don't have much idea about what it is, and then you experiment with that. Or some third kind can be replicating a successful plan. And that means there is something that is working in context A, your context is context B. You want to find out whether what worked in context A will work in context B. If you want to do that, that will be more of a replicating the same study in a different setting. That means in your setting. But it has been, let's say it has been proved very useful in Haryana in a school. I'm teaching in a school in Telangana. So I will carry out the same research and see whether it works in my context. That's a replication. Do you have anything else in mind in terms of what a good problem is? Can you go to menti.com and use the password 194488 and answer this question? I'll go there.
Can you please retell the password, sir?
Yeah, I will. Password is 194488.
Sir, website again, please. Thank you.
Menti.com. Something that you have planned, you have worked on or planning to work on, a topic. Collaboration, teacher cognition, metacognition, assessment. Menti.com, and passcode is 194488. I gave you three options: experimenting with something new, doing a replication study, and solving a problem. ICT in the classroom is too broad. Teaching pronunciation, flipped classroom. Okay, impact of the use of assessment. Okay, impact of teaching flipped classroom, cognition, collaboration, strategies of English to pre-primary kids, impact of the use of assessment, rubrics, assessment rubrics, developing writing skill. Okay, so some of these activities are like, some of these are no, right? Something which are adapted from other settings and you are trying to work on in your setting, which have been proved to be useful, and you are trying to, you know, kind of experiment with all those things. Uh, Argumentative essay writing, enhancing coherence in writing. Okay, lots of good topics we have. Wonderful. So we have 9 seconds, then we will leave this. Now voting is closed. Okay, so we'll come back to once again uh, screen sharing, and we'll look at the tab again. Okay, so you looked at these problems, and before we think about what a good problem is, we need to decide whether we are trying to replicate, or we are trying to with something new, or we are trying to solve a problem. Then I wanted you to mention anything else you could have done. I mean, like, there are several things people do to, you know, to verify what is happening, whether they are working on a night, whether the problem is really researchable. This is something that we need to think about. Let's say, for example, you give me one problem. Let's say use of ICT skills. Then my question will be, how will you know whether it's a whether it's a problem that is worth exploring in your classroom? First question is, you need to ask, by ICT skills, what do I mean by ICT? Then you say that, okay, information communication technology, but what do I mean by that? Let's say I say that digital tools. What do you mean by that? Which tools are you talking about? Let's say I'm talking about computer. So why didn't you write computer? Why did you write ICT? Computer, are you talking about internet? So why didn't you write internet based tools? And then if you say internet based tool, I will ask, which internet based tool are you talking about? Are you using multiple internet based tools? Yes. Why did you choose to use? The next question. Then you say that because my learners are not able to write. So why didn't you mention that use of internet based tools to improve my learners writing? So have you looked at, so how will I know whether it's worth exploring? I will go back and search on Google whether people have worked on internet-based tools for improving um learners' writing, tertiary or secondary school learners or tertiary learners' writing abilities. So if you Google, you will find a lot of research that have been already done. So what will you do? You will come back and see whether you are able to, your research will add to anything, or it's the same research you will be conducting. If you are not able to add as such, you can conduct the same kind of research because it was conducted in somewhere else. You can do it here. That will be a good start. But replication studies are not the best kind of studies as such. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that they are worth doing. When you think that you are a starter, and you want to you want to learn how to research, it's a good start. Look at something that has been done and try to do this, to do the same thing in the same way in your setting, in a different setting. That can be a good start. So yes, so this is one question. Or somebody said that finding learners using learners or improving learners metacognitive ability. uh, then I will ask, why are you improving learners metacognitive ability? Because it will give rise to better language learning. In what way? Which skills are you talking about language learning? I'm talking about speaking. So why don't you say that in using metacognitive strategies to improve learners' speaking skills? And what kind of strategies, again, you will ask me the next question, what kind of strategies are we talking about? A few more. Sorry. Okay, so I'll be talking about then about a few more strategies, uh, to identify whether a problem is worth exploring. One, you keep asking questions. If you can't ask questions because you may not be in a position to ask right kind of questions, like the way I'm doing it after being with research for, let's say, 12 years almost. I started my MPhil in 2008. So maybe 12 years, and 12 years, this is what I've learned, how to question. So maybe it'll take time. So maybe sit with somebody who has some experience in publishing papers, in conducting research, and ask questions. It's very simple. You don't have to have degrees or anything. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have somebody to support me as such. That's why it took so much time. But if you have people, people who can really help you, then you can do a very good study. So yes, so touchstone is first thing is whether it will improve the quality of learning and teaching in your institution, in your classroom. This should be the first question. Will it improve? What will it improve? How will it improve? Will it decrease my workload? All those questions you need to ask, and then you can verify whether this topic is really researchable. Once you are done with this, I have a few things. So, knowing if something is worth exploring, the first thing is you can go back to previous research, and Google is a good source. Another very good source can be Google Scholar. Once again, Google Scholar. Go to Google Scholar, type, use keywords and type. Let's say you are talking about using internet-based, you know, uh, platforms to improve academic writing. So you say internet-based platform, academic writing. You type, you will get a lot of research. On the left side, there will be a panel. I mean, there'll be these years will be given. You can set the how, when, from what, which year, which duration of years I'm talking about, you want the data from. So you can set minimum is 2016, and so anything that happened be after 2016 will appear on that page. So it's important to look at fresh research in 5 years, 6 years, what has happened. Generally, people look at very old research, which is not really worth unless it's a fundamental textbook. And generally, textbooks are useful, very fundamental textbooks if you're starting. But once you get into it and you are looking at problems and you are writing a paper and all, more than fundamental books, it will be always articles, research articles, which touch upon fundamental books but have built on and moved things forward. So if you want to get remain updated about what is happening in the field, in the fields of your interest, it's good to look at existing research, and in platforms like Google Scholar, ResearchGate, Academia Edu, and you can look at journals, specific journals also. You can write to people and find their articles and do a lot. We can talk about it a little later. Then asking people, reliable people, for help. By that I mean, there are people who have before you, people who have already done this kind of thing. So there is no harm in asking people to help you, but it's important to look at their research, whether they have published only theories and review of research. I don't want to, shame anyone, or I don't want to bitch about anyone, or I don't want to blame anyone for what they have done. But this is what I have done also. But review of literature, writing review of literature for publications and giving all those lectures about how to do this, how to do that in an article is not really worth for somebody who you would go for advice. So you should go for advice to people who have published good research based on experiments or based on data collection, proper methodology, and some data-based, evidence-based research. People who have published, go to them and ask them, how do I go about this? So maybe sit with them, talk to them, pester them a little. That's the way to learn. All of us, we have done this. We have been through the same process, and you can do the same thing. It's not very difficult. People are generally very generous. Then the next thing is posting queries in professional forums. So we have loads of forums like Teacher Research, I manage a forum. We have around 4,000 teachers in that, English language teachers and researchers. It's called ELTI India, ELT @ I, India. And there are other platforms. Many platforms are there on Facebook. and Twitter. You can join some of these platforms and keep yourselves updated about what's happening in the areas of your interest. Or you can post also queries about whether this is worth exploring. Generally, I give very straightforward one-line feedback to queries when people ask me about these things on Facebook. They send me a message and ask, I plan to work on this for a paper. What do you think? My reply is very short and crisp. If it's nonsensical, I will say that it's not worth exploring. It's kind of overexplored kind of thing. Can you look at these things before you think about a topic? So I give some reading generally. Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Some suggestion. If I have to do, I generally do like this. And if I have to seek help from somebody, I write to them and a mail with all the details and all, and ask very politely, request them to respond to my mail. I'd keep doing that. Even today I do that. So not an issue. You can do that. Then creating mind maps. After you get a reply from people, get some information from people, read some research, and say that these are the things which have not been done in the field, right? This is something which has not been explored much in the field. I'm saying that explored, underexplored, overexplored, not unexplored. These are the things you should think about. So generally, underexplored areas are preferred if you are already into research. If you are starting, explored areas or overexplored areas are also fine. I have no issues if you are a starter, a beginner. But if you have already done research, not worth doing if areas are explored or overexplored kind of thing. Then thinking about solutions. So Einstein talked about this. A problem can't be solved by the same kind of thinking that has created them. So thinking out of box. I mean, thinking in kind of in a divergent way. I'm just checking if anybody wants to enter. No, okay. So if problem thinking has that has created them, I mean, problem can't be solved in this with the same kind of thinking. So if you are saying that the people face problems when I face problems in my classroom when it comes to teaching academic writing skills, my learners are not able to write properly. So, and if you keep thinking and if you keep thinking in the same way without questioning your ability to teach, without involving anyone to question the style of teaching, kind of students, their social, if you don't do something different there, I don't think there is a way out. There is no way out. So the first thing you need to do is to change things. Why it's not happening? Can I do this? Can I change that? Can I change this? Can I change this? Can I question this? Can I look at my own recording when I'm teaching writing? Am I looking at the using right kind of materials? My strategies of teaching, how I teach, class teaching methodology, all those things should be taken into account. If you do that, maybe there will be a research paper which will be ready. So in the process of finding a solution, you can also write a research paper. It's not very difficult. So the first option is when we are thinking about solutions, if you will relate it to what I have already mentioned, uh, if you are talking about if you have already an option available, let's say there are beautiful books written by, let's say, Stephen Bailey on academic writing, why not use those textbooks? Why not use the materials written by Stephen Bailey or Catherine Jemash to teach academic writing? Why use materials from sources that are not really reliable, or your own materials? Why not something that has been proved really effective? Why not bring them and use them here and see whether that solves your problem? So I'm saying that you can replicate something that has been done. People have conducted research, found this works and mentioned. So take that same thing and use in your classroom. This is great for a beginner. If you're starting, thinking about publishing research, thinking about writing papers, this is an excellent beginning. Take something that has been done, something that you can understand. When you read, you understand, you think it's related to my classroom, it's relevant to my classroom. Take that and use it. If you do that, then that solves a lot of problems for you to begin with. And for example, I will say the games to improve speaking skills. What kind of games? In the classroom, games that you can play which involve speaking, a lot of conversation. So those games can be used for speaking skills. It's already proved to be very effective, right? Already there is research evidence to support this claim. So you can do the same thing. I use games and this worked in my class, and you can write a short paper and publish somewhere. This is great for a beginner. Okay, something that has been done, proved effective. Take that strategy and use in your classroom. A little better than that, I mean, like the next stage can be you can work very hard and come up with something new or something that you can be proud of. So, like nobody has done this is first time thinking about it. For example, I can give you one example which we have something like, let's say, interviewing for improving conversation skills. It's an underexplored area, I would say. It's not very well explored area. So this can be an innovation. You use interviewing skills, like one interviews a teacher, a student interviews people, and all that recording and presented in the class, and people analyze the conversation. This can be an excellent way of teaching speaking skill, conversation skills. So if you work hard and come up with something like this is more than welcome. Then the next thing is modify and tweak existing strategy. That means I'm talking about adapting something which and taking things from different sources, putting them together, tweaking it a little bit, and then using it and seeing. For example, uh, grading based on meta evaluation, grading, effective grading. Let's say, how do I know what effective grading is? I'm not able to grade my students effectively, because when I give them 10 scores to students, they're not really good at speaking, but they score 10. Some people who are scoring 8 or 7, they are much better than people who are scoring 10. Problem with grading. So I'm saying that how can I make my grading better? So I say that meta evaluation, like look at your evaluation, how you are evaluating, think about how you are doing it, give it to 10 people or 15 other peers to evaluate your evaluation skills, or to look at your evaluation skills and comment or ask you questions or something like that. So if you engage in meta evaluation on in relation to grading, maybe you will be able to improve your grading skills. So I'm saying that these are small things, these are things you can do, but the last one, because though it's taken, different strategies are put together and you are adapting, this requires a lot of experience, and requires it. Generally, it is done in academic research. A lot of people do this, so requires a lot of practice and a lot of reading, kind of some amount of training and some practice, some experience put together, you will be able to do this. I have one more question in menti.com. Can you go to 1944 and 88? 1944 and 88. What kind of study have you done? This is my question. Adaptation, innovation, replication. See, you have done a lot of work already. So you are in a very good position to move to the next level, do even better than what you have done. All of you have done excellent work. So it's very obvious, like it's very difficult to innovate as such, because sometimes innovation means you may not be aware of what's happening, and that's why you call it innovation. Sometimes replication is easy because it has been done and you are aware you are doing it, but innovation is very difficult to define again. Which one would you call innovative? I am doing it for the first time. I never knew, nobody told me I'm doing it. I would call it innovation, but it has already happened elsewhere. So it may not be no innovation as such. So innovation is pretty difficult to define. So, but numbers are pretty good. Innovation is very high. So you are on right track. This is maybe this will take you forward. You will do a much better job than what you are doing right now. Hello. Okay. Disconnected. Can you ask somebody else? Yours got disconnected. Okay. But I need to allow you can directly join. Okay. So let's look at. So now we will talk about how to conduct research because this is preparation and you are ready with preparation. Now let's look at conducting research, which is the next stage. Once you are aware of these things, what you are doing, then you are too ready to conduct research, and which will involve the following steps. First, you need research questions. By that, I mean, first thing first, you start with research questions. Let's say, for example, I'll give you one. I have to explore, let's say I will take the last question I explored. Uh, how does an online training program uh, on digital literacy shape uh, EST teachers? EST means English for Science and Technology teachers. Digital integration of digital tools in their classrooms, so or in their teaching practices. This is the last research paper which I published. So in that, this was the question. So I was looking at if I train English for Science and Technology engineering college teachers, can that in my training focused on integration digital tools, use of digital tools, how does that shape their integration of digital tools in their teaching and learning, in teaching and assessment? How do they do that? So this is the question I asked in the beginning. Your research questions should truly reflect what you plan to do. If you see a problem, your research question should truly reflect the problem you have in mind. For example, my students are not able to speak. So I read some literature, I look at some sources, and I think maybe engaging them in, I think I need to motivate them. This is just a psychological barrier. This is what I found out after doing some preliminary investigation. I found that they lack self motivation. So I go to some psychology people and ask them how to improve self motivation. So how to improve, how to develop their motivation or improve their motivation, enhance their motivation, let's say. So there are people who told me these are the ways in which you can enhance their motivation. So I got one strategy, which is engaging them in peer commenting will improve their speaking skill. So if peer commenting is as a strategy I'm using, you can ask a question: how does peer commenting as a strategy, how effective is peer commenting as a strategy for improving elementary learners speaking skills, elementary ESL learners speaking skills. So I'm talking about peer commenting as a strategy to improve their speaking skills. So this truly should reflect the kind of study you plan to do. At a higher level, you can the questions decide whether the study will be qualitative or quantitative. More or less, most of the time, the questions almost indicate whether you are planning to do a quantitative study or qualitative study. For a qualitative study, generally it's how and why questions we ask, sometimes what, not generally. How much, to what extent, to what degree is or yes or no, these questions are generally quantitative in nature. Okay, so you think about what kind of research question you need. I have given you a link here, you can click on that. I'll upload this to a platform and share the link with you. Here it suggests how to create a good research question. Then next one is thinking about the approach. What kind of approach will be suitable for carrying out your study? So the first kind of approach I'm thinking about is the road to the best possible data should be the approach. So whether qualitative, whether quantitative, whether mixed methods, whichever it is, with whichever takes you to the best possible data. You want to answer the question, you need data, and the kind of approach that will give you the best data. For example, I want to know why some of my learners are failing over and again in the class, and there are 5 learners, so you don't have to do a quantitative study there. Just go for a pure qualitative case-based study, it'll work. So the kind of data you want will decide what kind of approach you need. Let's say you want to find out how your school responds to let's say CCE, continuous comprehensive evaluation. Then it will be more of a survey research, which will be quantitative. More of less of quantitative survey will help. So yeah, so you need to think about what kind of approach will be suitable for you in the study. Then next one will be methods. What kind of tools will get you there? So you need to decide, once you decide the approach, what tools of data collection will get you there. What methods of data collection, method or tool, you can use alternatively, the same. So what kind of method of data collection would you do you need? This is the next question. So if it's a qualitative study, you need qualitative tools for data collection of data. If you are doing a quantitative study, you need quantitative tools for collecting data. Accordingly, you will decide whether you will use an interview, qualitative or quantitative, questionnaire, quantitative. Interview is qualitative, sorry. Questionnaire can be quantitative, can be qualitative. Checklist can be qualitative. Test can be qualitative, can be quantitative. And then document analysis, diary, focus group discussion, all these are tools and they are related to, that's why I put a kind of double side arrow, because they are related, they are based on the approach you have. And the next thing is analysis. Analysis is also related to your approach. What do I do with the data? If I have loads of interview data, what do I do with? You have to do it qualitatively. You need a qualitative analysis tool. So these are interconnected. The question, approach, methods, analysis, they're all interconnected. So you need to learn these things in some detail to be able to do a very good research paper, to write a very good research paper. Not knowing them at all, well, you can still write a teacher research paper, but you should not stay there forever. Try to get beyond, go beyond this, learn these things, and try to make a, write a better paper than what you have done, already done. So you need some books and training. This is what I meant. What you can avoid is, at this point, these are some of the things we have been talking about. We'll take some questions after this and then go to publishing papers, which I'll take around 15-20 minutes, not more than that. You can avoid, so I would request, if you have questions, you can put it there, and the people like Gopal and others, they will collect the questions, and or I'll read the question and see the questions and try to answer. These are some of the things you can avoid in the process. First, writing theoretical papers, right? Taking like feedback as a tool, as a strategy for improving language skills. It's dated. I mean, you take this person has done this, that person has done this, you should do that, you should do this. This kind of papers are useless. They are not useful for you. They are not improving your learning, your teaching. They are not improving your students' learning. They are not improving, not helping anybody at all almost. So you, if you are a beginner, if you are at a stage where I am, or somebody like before me, at 5 years before me, or 10 years before me, or you are a starter or something like that, avoid these things. They are not worth doing. If you when once you become an expert in the area, you have serious knowledge about the area, you read thoroughly, you are aware of the current 2020 research across big journals and excellent, you have access to everything, you know what is happening in the field, you are familiar with literature, maybe theoretical papers are for you. So people like Simon Bogg or Jackson Richards or Widdowson, um, people who are very famous, researchers in the field of applied linguistics, if they write a paper, theoretical paper, that makes sense because they are aware of what is happening, the currents, and they can process a meta-analysis of the existing research. We cannot at this level, very difficult. You can do, I'm not saying that you cannot, but I'm saying that if you are starter, if you are in this webinar, I don't think you should do this is plain straight. Next one, preaching, what and how to do this and that, how to assess, how to teach, doing a preaching, you should do this, after that you should do that, that kind of paper, boring and useless. If you write, preach completely, this is what you have, this is what you should do, people should do, people should do, it becomes boring and monotonous and useless almost. Rather than doing that, take your classroom data, say that I have done this, I have found this useful, how you found useful, just show that, how you used in the classroom, talk about it, I used in this way, I found this, that's why these are the reasons for which I think these are useful. Present the classroom data in which, which will justify your claims, and then this is a good paper. Getting fascinated by numbers, some of us, we have really, like we go, you know on our knees when we see numbers, statistics. I don't think, that's a way forward as such. If you are trained in statistics, if you know how to use statistics, go for it. There is nothing wrong. If you don't know and you think numbers matter, I will go for some percentage number, t-test, this and that, you are gone. You are doomed. I've not done much of statistics. I'm aware, I'm trained in statistics, but not done statistical research. No fascination as such for now. If I have to do it, I'll do it in future, but not till now. I've not done it, and I had no fascination, and it's fine. People are there. Many people in the world, some of the greatest researchers, have never done statistical research. This is just a, hawa. Next one is writing up a history of dated literature. This is one of the terrible things. I was the guest editor for Fortel in this for July 2020. So I saw some papers which talked about some dated literature which are from 2008, 1987, 2001, and a history. What happened then what happened, then what happened. You don't need all that in a research paper. You just need some citations, fresh research, and what gaps you are filling. That's it. So don't write a history of literature. You don't need them. And levels at which you work. So maybe you have just landed in Bollywood. I'm saying that if you're a beginner, then you may not have much training in research, but you are interested to publish papers. So think about what you need at that place, at that stage, and what kind of papers you should write. Because this, what I'm talking about, can be on a continuum. All of us should not be writing similar kind of papers. You think about what you should do. And in terms of, let's say you are a struggler, you are in Bollywood, but you are not getting many movies, then you have some formal training in research, but you need, you know, somebody who needs more support. And then there is a star who is some formal training in research, but needs a little push. So you need a little more motivation, somebody to show you this is to be done in this way, and somebody handholds you, and then you do it. And then the superstar, when somebody has formal training in research but needs to self-actualize. Somebody who has a potential, training, a PhD probably, an MPhil probably, but has not published in mainstream journals. Those journals you talk about, let's say IJEEMMLLOO, those are not good journals. Mainstream journals for somebody who is trained in PhD should be, let's say, a system, second language writing, ESP journal, and let's say RELC, maybe TESOL quarterly, TESOL journal, language testing, language assessment quarterly. So journals published by Springer, Elsevier, Sage, Taylor and Francis, Routledge, Oxford, Cambridge, Wiley. Generally, mainstream journals are published by them or by seriously good institutions like, let's say, there are organizations or universities, they have their independent journals which are not published by these publishing companies, but nonetheless they are great journals. So maybe those are mainstream journals. So you should, if you are trained and all, you should target mainstream journals. And so target depends on these things. And I have given this, JLB is, I'm saying them, just landed in Bollywood. STGLR struggler, STR star, SSTR a superstar. So whether you have awareness of literature, awareness of methodology, comparing your findings with those of others in the discussion section, or writing a research paper. Writing a research paper everybody can do. But comparing your findings with those of others, only superstars can do. Somebody who has training, who has done some research, who has written papers, good papers, can do this. Otherwise, it's very difficult to do. So strugglers may do it with some effort. Stars also find it difficult. Just landed, they cannot do this. If you're a beginner, generally this is not expected of you. Awareness of methodology, all kinds of things. If you're a beginner, again, not really expected. If you're a beginner, I don't expect you to be aware of literature also. Literature means research, what has been done in the area. But as we train, as you go to the next level, and you must try to reach the next level, you keep trying so that you would reach the superstar level. I'm saying that it's important to try, even if you are in school, even in a college, you are in a university, it's important to keep moving to the next stage. This is what I talked about in the last webinar. This is one thing I always think about. I think about it's important to move from what you are and do better work than what you have already done. And writing a paper, research paper, is all about that. It's not about you cannot write, you can write, but can I write a better paper? Can I write a still better paper? Can I write still better paper? It depends on where you are publishing. That will tell you where you stand. If you are able to publish in a national peer reviewed journal, then you are doing really well. You are a struggler and going to become a star. If you are able to touch international, you are becoming a star. If you are a superstar, you are into international publications and you are regular. So this is what you need to expect. What to expect, what to target, you decide. I don't know. So because you may be one of these things, one of these people. I don't know. That's why I'm giving you multiple options. Where you stand, you need to know that really well, and then decide what I should do. Before we talk about making a publication, any questions? If you have any questions, you can.
Yes, there are a few questions in the chat box. You can look at the.
Can you ask me?
Are you able to see the chat box?
Yeah. Just one. I'll take one by one. Is triangulation of methods compulsory in research? Rosemary has asked this. Triangulation gives you a better perspective. It makes your research more thorough. That means if you collect data, let's say I'm collecting data from my learners about what they think about my teaching. This is one information. How do I collect data? Let's say I'd give them a questionnaire. I'd say that how do I teach? What do you think about my teaching? What are the things you like? What are the things I don't like? So through a questionnaire, they give me some feedback. That is one source of data. Another source I can ask, if I'm looking at my teaching, quality of my teaching, I can ask a peer. Let's say I'm teaching my colleague. I can ask my colleague to observe my class and write some notes and share the notes with me. That will be another source of data that will make my study more thorough and more reliable. My data, I can make a claim on the basis of data available to me. And triangulation definitely makes my study more robust, I would call. So it's important, definitely very important to do a triangulation. But I'm not saying that it's compulsory. It may not be compulsory. Sometimes so it may be so that you are collecting data from one source and it just works sometimes. So it depends on this kind of study, the question you are addressing. Krishnam Raju has asked me a question: Is a study unacceptable without a research question? Generally, in general research papers, we need a research question. Unacceptable. How will you do a study without a question? You tell me. How will you ride a bicycle without knowing the road where you are going? How will you do a study and show that I can ride a bicycle, but I don't know what road is? If you don't know what the road is, then you cannot ride a bicycle. So you need to know the road where you are going. You need to have a direction. So it's not unacceptable. You cannot conduct a study without a research question. That's almost impossible. Is hypothesis mandatory? Not in all kinds of studies. In exploratory research, for example, you don't begin with a hypothesis, you end with a hypothesis. Like you conduct a study, you have no idea about the context, what is happening, you have no idea about the entire study, and it's absolutely unpredictable. So you cannot start with a hypothesis. You can, with some input, you can start with that and then go on and develop a hypothesis at the end of your study. So that is also a possibility. So it's important to it may not be always possible to have a hypothesis in the beginning. Some studies, for example exploratory studies, do not begin with hypothesis. How many research tools you use to avoid bias in research studies depends on the question. So there is no fixed number of tools, how many tools you need to have a study without bias or something like that. It depends on what question you are asking and how many tools you can use. So depending on the question, depending on your approach, we can decide how many tools will be appropriate or adequate for your study. Sufficient, I would not say, but adequate, yes. Suggest some important data analyzing tool. You must tell me whether you are analyzing quantitative data, qualitative data. I have not used many software, but you can use, you have quantitative and qualitative software. You can use SPSS, you can use NVivo, and it depends on what kind of data you are analyzing and what kind of study you are conducting. So depending on that, you can decide what kind of tool you need for your analysis. What is the take on notion that quantitative research is more reliable than qualitative research? That's a myth. There is no evidence to suggest that quantitative research is more reliable than qualitative research. It is not. For very simple, you cannot conduct a quantitative research which actually where the situation actually demands a qualitative inquiry. For example, knowing bias. In my first research paper, I can go back to my own research papers, you can ask me for those later. For example, I conducted a study on bias in the classroom and how Dalit students cope with bias in the classroom, teaching bias in the classroom, let's say coping strategies. So, or challenges of language in the classroom. You may not conduct a quantitative study because you may have to have then plenty of the students and loads of people willing to give you that data. It may not happen. You need to make friends, go close to people, they should trust you, then you can carry out a research there. In that case, it's a qualitative study which will be essential. You cannot conduct a quantitative study in that case. So you cannot say that exactly it's more reliable. You can are more generalizable if you say yes, to a great extent. Quantitative studies with large samples size, those studies are more generalizable, definitely yes. Does action research in the classroom help as content for research papers? Yes, absolutely yes. Wonderful journals are there. I'll give you a list of journals and share the PPT with you. You can visit those sites of those journals, and you can send your papers to them. I believe that you can carry out action research regularly, collect data from your own classroom and publish research. And wonderful journals are available all over the world for all levels, whether you have done your PhD MPhil, Masters, or no research degree. With anything you can publish. With any kind of degree, you can publish an action research if you're a teacher. I have no doubt about that. Absolutely no doubt. Shafakat, yes. If you are talking about quantitative data analysis tools, you can go for SPSS, which is pretty everywhere. It's used by everybody. And there are now most of the tests you are carrying out are available in the form of Excel sheets. So if you have to discuss what tool, what kind of research you are doing, and then what kind of tools you need, I can direct you to those sources. Like there are a lot of sources available where you have online platforms which are doing analysis and which are offering free Excel sheets carrying, let's say, t-test formulas, multivariate analysis, and ANOVA and COVA. All those sheets are available. Those Excel sheets are available, so you can directly use those sheets and carry out your analysis, quantitative analysis. Is comparison qualitative? Depends on what you are comparing, Prabhashini. Okay, perfect. So I'll talk about how to publish your research. That is next. Let's get on with that. Okay, comparing two studies. It may be qualitative, it may be quantitative. If you are comparing two cases, they can be multiple case studies. If you are comparing three cases, it can be 3 case studies. It depends on what you are comparing. If you are comparing cases, multiple cases. And if you are comparing loads of people and 100 learners from this level, that level, and that level, maybe they can be quantitative. So it depends on what you are comparing, who you are comparing. Should the record of action research be maintained? Yes, absolutely. Blended, yes, possible, Prabhashini. Mixed methods can also be used for comparative analysis, if you have in mind. Okay, let's talk about then preparation for publication.
There is one question which I would like to bring your attention to.
Yeah, please.
That is asked by Subhashish Nanda at the beginning, if you can see in the chart box, or else I can read for you.
Just read out.
Okay, what if I conceptualize one innovative study and while drafting I stumble upon a similar study carried out earlier? Would my study be still considered innovative and be lucrative for publication?
So it's a very good question, excellent question.
Yes.
I can give you one example of that. Let's say I wanted to do a study on finding out whether training improves teachers' performance. Training in digital tools improves their ability to integrate tools. There are studies there, but it's more not about innovation. The second part of it is more important, like whether somebody will accept that for publication. Somebody will accept that for a publication. A journal will accept if you very clearly mention that there are gaps which have not been explored much and which are kind of underexplored and not the gaps still exist in the literature, and very few studies have been carried out. Like you can cite one or two which you saw, and then say that my study will add to the knowledge base when it comes to like for one area. Let's say you have found something, and then you, while analyzing, you found something else. You can add that my finding is different or similar to that, the findings of that study, in this way or that way. You should make it explicit and mention it so that your study also gains value. It will gain value when you are comparing and contrasting with existing research. So it will still be a very good study for publication if it's not kind of an overexplored area. So I have no doubt about that, Subhashish. You can write your questions as we go on, and Gopal will note down, and I will talk about preparation for publication. So to begin with, when we are talking about preparation for publication, I will begin with taking stock of few things. First is my abilities, where I stand, what I know already, what kind of training I have, where I teach, how much time I have, and what I'm able to do. How is my English? Have I showed my English to somebody, let's say somebody in a university professor, let's say generally their English is considered to be better than others. I mean, people who are teaching in a school, maybe sometimes it's not true. I should confess that, because I have seen school teachers writing 100 times better than you know some of the university teachers. We have loads of samples. You must be knowing all of us. So I'm saying that somebody whose English is really, really good, somebody who has published a lot of research papers, let's say, let's trust the person. So show your English, show your write-up or your research draft to that person and find out. So that's the way to know your research ability. Apart from your training, you can know your English, academic English ability. Next one is learning about the resources. By resources, I mean whether you have access to journals, whether you are familiar with all the platforms, whether you know people, whether you know whom to ask. If I don't have this article, don't have this book, if there you have people who can supply. So know your resources, know your library, know people, know your access, all that. And the next one is ambition, whether there is motivation or whether you have a goal. Whether if you're teaching in a school, do you want to move to a place where you would be allowed to conduct research and all? Do you have that kind of ambition? I don't want to stay in a school because there is no scope for research. I want to move somewhere else. If you have ambition, then you will do something about it. You will publish and make sure that you get a degree and do something about it. So these are the three things first you need to take stock of. Then next one will be thinking forward. So what I'll do, the first thing will be a kind of study I'm doing. So after you take stock of ability, think of what kind of study will be appropriate for my for me. So I will say the first thing will be the scale of the topic. Kind of study means the scale, how big the study should be. Can it be a small study and I can still publish? Yes. I published in REL. It's one of the most prestigious journals in our field of applied linguistics. Recently, I published an article, and I had only 3 teachers. How did they publish that? And they accept good, thorough case study research. So you can do that. So it doesn't matter whether only big sample size papers, some papers with big sample size, they get published. Not really. We don't have many international papers, ELT papers in India. We don't get it. It doesn't happen as such. People publish in secondary or generally B grade or C grade or D grade journals. Good solid international journals, very few. And with data you can publish. Yes, definitely. The topic should be something you are familiar with, something you know really well, and the kind of topic you can work on. You should then decide what topic will be suitable for you. If you are in a school, in a classroom, you don't have much time, work on something related to your students and talk to people to find out whether you can work on it. Approach, whether you can do a quantitative study or not will depend on whether you are in a position. When you take stock of things like I told you earlier, then you decide the kind of study that will be appropriate, whether it will be qualitative, quantitative, mixed, what will be. It depends on your training also, what you know. Then new knowledge or skill. Sometimes you may need new knowledge or skill. For example, you may need some training in research methodology, data analysis, software for analysis, all those things you may need. So knowing something new may be sometimes necessary. It may be required at some point. If it's required, think about how much you can learn if you need to learn something. And then learn it and then think about publishing. Or simultaneously you can do it. The next thing will be who will guide me. My academic writing ability, yes, it's there. And I told you earlier, there is no escape from this. Your English matters a lot. And international journals or big good journals, definitely. If you write well, chance of getting published is much, much higher than those who have poor English. Hero or a godfather? Yeah, who will guide me? Hero means can you be a hero on your own? Can you try and learn and do this on your own? Or you need a godfather, somebody who will handhold and guide you and teach you and make you a researcher. Depends on you. I can say what will suit you, what will not suit you. It's totally up to you. Okay. So these are some of the journals I have identified. The first thing, these are Desi, I call them, because these are Indian journals. English Classroom, Altai India Journal, and Altai Journal, and you have Fortel, you have Language and Language Teaching, published by Azim Premji. And there is a magazine, Teacher Plus. If you are a starter, Teacher Plus is also really good. It's not really a journal, but you can write some things from your classroom and you can publish there. These are the journals you should be targeting, whichever level you are. You should be targeting these journals if you're a beginner. This is good. Or you are at a struggler level, it's okay. And still to a star level, still okay. Because when I started, I published in all these journals, all four of them, and then I learned how to publish. So maybe I learned through publishing in these journals. The feedback helped, people helped, the editors helped, all of them they helped, and slowly I learned how to do this, how to do better than what I have done. So maybe the same track works for others. Just try. Teacher Plus, if you are not comfortable with methodology, you don't have much training, you are not really sure about analysis and tools and all that, then Teacher Plus might be a good option. If you're talking about foreign journals, I have given you an exhaustive list. I collected, searched, and found these. These are really good ones. All are action research based journals. They publish anything that you do in the classroom. Some of them are literature, some of them accept language, some of them accept social science, science, and everything they accept sometimes. So any discipline you are from, it doesn't matter. You can publish in these journals. These are action research based, exploratory action research based, teacher research based, your own classroom research based journals, and they are really really good. All of them have standard nice journals. If you want to go beyond this level and touch the higher level, then we can have another discussion. We are not talking about really academic and teacher research mixed kind of journals. Those are published by Oxford, Cambridge, and all, maybe sometime later. But these are really decent and good journals to learn how to write really well. These are the few things I would avoid. And first thing is paying to publish. Do not pay money to publish. What happens is you may get it published really fast, but later people will look at the journal, will see paid, and that leaves a really bad taste. So first thing is, do not play to publish at any cost. Do not do that. Please avoid journals which charge you, because it's not good for your career, academics, anywhere, prestige, name, fame. You will be ruined in future if you pay to publish. Believe me. And people have done. You may show me that somebody is in a central university, somebody is in IIT, somebody here, there. They have paid to publish. That's rubbish. That's low quality work. You don't want to do that. You are an action researcher, be a proud teacher researcher and do good work. Next one is publishing fast. If you are running after numbers, I think you should avoid that, because numbers will add a lot of trash work, bad work, shoddy work, which you will regret later. I've done a little bit of it in my career. I regret them. I regret writing them. I don't want you to regret, uh, uh, in relation to this thing. So don't try to publish fast. Just avoid publishing fast. Go at a speed which is comfortable. You write well. Spend more time on writing, honing your skills, polishing your skills, doing better than what you have done. Don't try to publish too fast. One article in a year is very good, in fact, by any standard. Publishing in a non-peer reviewed journal, it's bad because you just get a publication but you never get feedback. Feedback means if your peers review and give you feedback and write exhaustively about what you should do, what you have done, where you can improve, there is wonderful scope for improvement. That's why send journals get rejected. That's also a good strategy. You send it to very high quality journals, just throw it on your face, but the right comments which help you a lot. So important to send it to good peer reviewed journals. When spending less time on preparation and more time on revision, this is what I believe in. You should spend more time on preparation and less time on revision. More time on preparation, by that I mean when you prepare your manuscript well, write, spend so much time, work very hard, prepare a thorough manuscript, send it to a journal, then the revision work will be much less. People won't ask you to do too much work. If you send it a trash article, then maybe you will reject it, that is the worst, or you will come, the article will come back for a revision with like 10 pages of comments. It will drive you mad and crazy. So better to spend as much time as possible on preparation. So there are issues of rejection which was raised by earlier by um, Subhashish. So I will pick up from there. So spend a lot of time, spend like 6 months. I spend around 6 months to get a paper ready so that I have enough time to go over it over and again, do my data collection properly and get things done, and then writing takes around 3 to 4 months, 5 months, data collection 5 to 6 months, depends on the kind of study you are doing. And so it takes a lot of time to get things ready, get yourself and the paper ready. Get yourself means train yourself, familiarize yourself with academic writing, paper writing, methodology, analysis, all those things. And your paper, you can get it ready. You have a lot of scope for doing this. We can talk about platforms maybe later in some other webinar we will discuss. But you should do this. At this point, I can say that spend more time on the paper. That will reduce your submission issues and rejection issues both. Then getting it proofread. The very important before you submit, give it to somebody reliable, because sometimes you feel that your ideas will be stolen and all. Give it to somebody who doesn't really care for what you have written. Somebody who has achieved a lot. Give it to such people who are really good, nice hearted people, kind hearted people. Give it to them. Ask them to read and give you some feedback. One line of feedback is more than enough. If it's coming from somebody like if you're a big shot, let's say, with one line, it works really well. Then using rejection to motivate. This is what you should learn. At some point, your article may get rejected. Sometimes people don't like it. People say that this is a bad article, but ask them why do you think it's bad, and then note down all the things they say. Rejection doesn't mean that from a journal. Rejection also maybe from a peer, or maybe from somebody who has done good work and say that this is a bad article and I can't accept it as a good article for these reasons, and gives you 5 reasons. Note down all those reasons. Try to work on those things. That will make your article much better. So here we are, and I have some quick tips for you. The first one is to become a better researcher. Use MS Word to maintain reference, because if you're working in some areas, definite areas, specific areas, in Learn, to go to YouTube, type maintaining, how to maintain reference in MS Word. Learn how to do this. I'm not going to teach you here. It will take a lot of time, but you can learn it. 2, use Google Docs for writing and seeking comments. Always use Google Docs because it's on time and it's live. It doesn't get destroyed. It remains there. So use Google Doc. Do not write on your computer directly. Write on a Google Doc as much as you can. Ask for feedback on Google Doc, because if somebody types, the comments remain there. So it's a wonderful platform for that. Third thing is use 3 platforms which I use regularly: ResearchGate, Google Scholar, and Academia A2 for articles. If you don't find articles, go to these platforms. Most of the articles you need are there. And if you don't find, write to the person who has written the article, ask them, request them to send you the articles. Works for me will work for you. Then use Google Drive. Create folders. Say that this is data collection, this is analysis, this is review of literature, and keep folders and keep stuff. Maintain in Google Drive. It will remain safe. This computer is not safe. If it crashes, you are gone. Then rejection letters to contact experts. Use rejection letters sometimes. Somebody says that it's a bad article, I cannot read, it's bad because of these reasons. Contact them, ask them how I can do better. Whoever says that it's bad, ask them why it's bad. Do not get offended. I don't get offended. If somebody says your article can be improved in many ways, I ask how. I have no issues. I'm like, kind of, somebody might say it's like you are stupid or shameless. Maybe I am, but I think I learn a lot. Then inspiration from those who are ahead, from those who are just ahead of you, like people who have published more articles, done better work than me, and I try to learn from them immediately, who are ahead of me. They inspire me and they give me a healthy competition. I like them. So you can do that. People who have done better than you, look up to them, stay with them, talk to them, find out from them, and then learn from them in the process. And relentlessness. You keep working, keep thinking, keep talking, and keep participating. Join me on, Alta India and all that, and see how it works. So I have this framework which I have created. All the points I'm talking about, I have talked about here. First, self motivation, then appropriate preparation, then expert guidance, then relentlessness, then demonstration of improvement, because you need to improve and you need to show yourself that I have improved. I published in this, now it's a better journal, I published in that. And then reward in some form. You should move from this teaching situation to a better school, to a better college, to a better university, to a better place, more salary, something, some reward you must give yourself in some way. Now go to menti.com and use the code 13, 57 and 39. Menti.com 13, 57, 39. Yeah, one area you need immediate improvement, in which I didn't write because I didn't have space. One area in which you need immediate improvement. Academic writing, yeah. I feel that's the biggest challenge. Not many of us are trained in this. That makes it much more difficult, very difficult sometimes. Academic vocabulary and all those style sheets and all those, familiarizing yourself with all those things, it takes a lot of time. So yeah, it's one of the important things. Awareness of methodology, yes, definitely. You cannot do any research without awareness of methodology. Some of us will lack self-motivation, but if you are in this webinar, I don't think you lack self-motivation. You have enough motivation. You will do well at some point. You are already motivated because you are part of this. Second one is tracing relevant literature. That means tracing relevant research. I don't know whether this is important, that is important. I don't know how to find literature related to my area. That is tracing relevant literature. By that I meant this. If you are done with the voting, then you can write your questions on live streaming, and we will take questions from YouTube live streaming, and we will also take questions from Google Meet, and we'll be finishing soon. Okay, so I think more of I will wait for another 1 minute or less than that. Code is 135739, menti.com. Okay. Yep. Any questions?
Would you be comfortable if they ask you direct questions, or they should type it in the chat box?
Yeah, sure. Why not? Yes.
If it's,
you can.
They can turn on the audio.
You can turn on your audio and ask your question one by one.
And ask questions directly.
Yep. Any questions? I would be happy to answer.
May I ask you a question, sir?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So how to make a research paper plagiarism free?
What's your name? Okay. Thank you
I'm
for the
Krishnamraj
question.
from Vishakhapatnam.
Okay, Krishnam Raju. This is plagiarism will become a concern. It's like AIDS. It's like AIDS. I would call plagiarism a disease like AIDS because if you are aware of the rules of copyright rules, then the chance of you getting into trouble is very less. So first thing is to familiarize yourself with copyrights, what you can do, what you can include, what you shouldn't include. For example, I'll give you a quick overview. You need to find out, it's there in Wiley. Wiley publication has a list on copyright, intellectual copyrights. But to give you a quick idea, certain things you can avoid, like taking tables, charts, graphs, diagrams, figures, pictures, audio clips, video clips, stories, poems, anything from any source. You need written permission from the publisher and from the author. You cannot use them, even if you are saying quoting them, you cannot use them in a journal article. That will be considered plagiarism unless you have written permission from the publisher and the author. And when you are taking permission, make sure you use their format, because most of the people have a format, proper format. Follow the format, write to them. If they don't reply in, I think, 7 days or 15 days, check the number of days you have to wait. After that, it becomes you have already asked for copyright, and that is given to you if they don't respond. If they do respond, it's great. If they don't, that is their problem, not yours. You can go ahead and use. Okay. One. Two is if you're taking from a journal, you can take around 45 words without asking the author for permission as such. You can use up to 45 words at one place from a journal. It won't be considered plagiarism. You can quote the person, just that you have to quote the person. Same thing from a book. At one go, you can take 90 words from a book. Beyond 90 words, you can take you have to take permission. But if you take 90 words at one place, 90 words from another place, 90 words from another place, if you keep doing that and it comes to up to 300, it's still acceptable. You can still use 300 words in total at 3 places, 4 places in 300 words total. That will be still without permission and just mentioning their name. If you want to go beyond 90 words at one place and beyond 300 words in total, then you need to seek permission. Generally, copyrights expire in 100 years. So books older than 100 years may not have copyright, but some of them have. So just check. This is basically copyright. And I wrote a thesis of around 370 pages. And I didn't even check for plagiarism back then. Later I checked, I didn't have any plagiarism at all. Because I was not copying from any source at all. When I was writing, I was trying to write on my own, use others' views to write on my own. I didn't copy anything. So if you don't copy anything, you don't have to even check. If you're aware of plagiarism rules and you don't copy from any source, you don't have to think for the second time at all. This is what I have realized. Any other question?
Sir, Ritu Lohani here. May I ask something?
Yeah, go ahead.
I have actually two questions to ask. First is like whenever I read some research like done by people that they have published in journals, like most of them like are not very like normal language that we use. So is it compulsory that we use some very hard hitting words or flowery words whenever even when I talk to person who has mentioned or written research? Like is it a basic criteria? Is it so?
For an action research, and thank you for the question. It's a very good question and very it requires some discussion, more discussion. It's a debate. It's part of a debate, in fact, what kind of language people should use for publications. Generally, when you are writing for this action research journals, which I have shared with you, you may not need anything special. You can use the language you use for teaching, the same kind of language. It may not be absolutely informal. Hey, what's up? That kind of language may not work, but general writing that you have learned in, because you are a master's in English, and you are teaching for so many years, So you know the kind of language you are using in the classroom. Correct English with the same language will work for a general action research paper. For an applied linguistics journal or a ELT journal of international standard, you need to read a lot, and that will automatically shape your vocabulary. There is no way I can describe which are appropriate, which are not right now. There is no way to talk about a list of words, but generally academic words are there, and you will learn. If you keep reading, it will be automatic. It takes time, but you will learn. Eventually it will automatically get into your vocabulary and you will start using them. So there is no rule as such. These are the words that will work, these are the words that won't work as such. It's flowery words and all, and these are all nonsensical. This is not there. It doesn't work as such. Any other question? You can unmute and ask if you want.
Sir, are referred journals and peer-reviewed journals are same, sir?
Yes, they mean the more or less the same thing. Refereed means you refer to somebody and somebody is there to go through it and give you some kind of feedback. And peer reviewed, it's the same thing. You send it to a referee, send it to somebody else. That's it.
And you haven't mentioned the UGC care list in your presentation. Are they not non-standard?
For the journals, most of the care list journals are no Indian journals, which are there in the care list are bad journals, and some of them are pathetic, really bad, because we don't have much authority over it, and we don't have much say over it, and we don't exist in UGC net and all. In ELT, it's not there. That's why, yeah, I mean, they are bad, generally bad. Yeah. You show me the journals, you can send me a list, I can verify and tell you also. But most of the people, those journals are really bad. Most of them bad. There may be a good one, but you have to show me. I have not come across good ELT journals in India which are decent, other than which I have mentioned. Maybe you can show me if they are there. But better to go for try for start with general publications, get used to it, learn, write well, and then think about better journals. Don't start with a care list in the beginning. It may not work as such. Any other question?
Is there any ways to get mentorship, to be mentored by someone else like you? Any official ways?
See, I am just one million people who are, I mean, maybe thousands of people who have done much better work than me in ELT in India. People have done wonderful work. You have to check, you have to find out people, trace the areas in which they specialize, and then talk to them, then connect with them, then write to them, then seek their advice, seek their opinions, seek their comments, feedback, and all that. But you need to identify which area you are working, whether they are interested, whether they have done work in that area. Identify those people, talk to them. May not be in India, maybe outside India, but you need to trace them, find them, connect with them, and then have a connect. I mean, maintain a kind of relationship with them, so that they feel that you are sincere, you are devoted, you are dedicated, and you are doing a lot of hard work to learn things. Make them believe that, and they will help you. And there's no formal way of doing it. You have to do it informally. I have been doing it. I talk to people, I seek people's help, talk to them, request them, but I also work as hard as possible to better myself in as many ways as possible. I work on my own and seek others' opinion. You need to do the same thing. We are on the same plane, more or less. Any questions?
Dr. Mahapatra, there is one question from YouTube.
Okay.
This is by Srinivas Raj.
Okay.
How do we check plagiarism for our research before submission in the university?
See, generally universities have these, this Government of India platform is there. Some Kund, what Kund? I have forgotten that. Some Kund is there. So
Utkund.
Utkund. Yeah. So you use that in India, as long as if you are here in India, then you can use that. And if your university can afford and it has, Turnitin, that's the best kind of software possible. But you may not need any of these things if you are writing on your own, and if you are aware of the rules I talked about, the plagiarism rules, intellectual property rules for maintaining intellectual property, respecting intellectual property rights. You need to be familiar with those rules. Then you may not need any of these. Unless you are a plagiarist, you generally enjoy copying and pasting, you don't need any plagiarism to as such at all. This is what I tell my PhD students. Do not encourage them to go back to plagiarism tools. I encourage them to reward themselves by writing originally. And I really love that kind of thing. I want them to write original. Whatever trash they give me, I'm happy correcting. But I don't enjoy reading it, they copy and paste and modify. I don't think that's appropriate. So you need to teach yourself to write original stuff. Even if it's bad, get feedback, learn the hard way. But that will take you somewhere. You may not need any plagiarism software. Believe me, I have not used Turnitin at all. Though Bits gives me Turnitin, I have an account. I can check anytime I want, but I have never used for all my international publications. I have never used Turnitin, so I won't really be keen on advising somebody to use Turnitin or any other database as such. I would go for be familiar with all the rules. Familiarize yourself with all the rules of copyright, intellectual copyrights, and then learn to write original writing. That's it.
Right. Preetham would like to know, is peer-reviewed journals equivalent to UGC CARE journals?
Not really. All the Scopus Index journals are accepted by UGC. So if you want to maintain one real standard, so go for Scopus Index journals. That takes care of all the lists possible. Nothing else will. That takes care of it entirely. And CARE list for English language teaching, CARE list, not a great CARE list. I don't really like the CARE list for ELT journals. From India, I'm talking about.
So do you think that when we analyze data in our research, can we go forward without the statistical analysis and statistical tables and like that?
You're saying that will that be necessary or something? What are you saying?
Pardon, sir?
What was the question?
When we do research or when we write the research, can we go without doing this statistical analysis and statistical interpretations?
See, so if you are saying that are statistical analysis necessary, I would say no. If you say can we include them, yes, we can. How can you do that? You need to learn, and you need to find out whether the kind of data you have collected will require statistical analysis as such. So these are the questions you need to ask, whether your questions requires quantitative data, and the kind of quantitative data you have collected, do they need exhaustive quantitative analysis as such? What kind of analysis? Then you need to figure out. Then you go for quantitative analysis. So I'm saying that it depends on the research question, what you have, and then the kind of quantitative tools you have used, and then the analysis accordingly you can decide. But if you ask me, is it necessary to use quantitative tools or statistical tools? Not really necessary at all. Not in all research. It depends on the question again. Yes.
Okay.
Let me ask you a question.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah.
So, what are the topics which come under classroom research, sir?
See, classroom can be done on some things, but you can start looking at 2 or 3 things from one thing, like the kind of materials you are using, the kind of assessment you are using, the kind of teaching methodology you are using for teaching, the problems with your learners, problems with your own teaching, problems with your own English, problems with learners' English. Then all these things can be looked into right now. Feedback, and in assessment again into feedback, type of test, writing, testing, assessing writing, assessing speaking, vocabulary, grammar, reading, all those things. So you have plenty of areas. If you list, you can make a huge list. Loads of things can be looked into in action research.
Yes, sir. But it is much neglected by people, I think.
Sorry?
Classroom research is much neglected by people.
Yes, unfortunately, because we don't have a platform, we don't have trained
Yes, sir.
teachers in India so that they can carry out classroom research. We don't offer much training. I mean, the kind of webinar the RI is conducting right now, we need many more webinars for teachers so that teachers familiarize themselves with classroom research and learn to do it more effectively and more efficiently.
Santosh sir, I have a question.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, please?
Yeah.
I am a school teacher and I can see in my classroom many problems. I can identify problems, but I want to do right on those problems. But the problem is that the question that I have is that I cannot identify whether I should go for qualitative way of addressing the problem or the quantitative way of addressing the problem. So how can I know that my problem must go through quantitative way or the qualitative way or the mixed way? So could you please throw some light on this question?
This is a very difficult question for you. How do you understand? So I told you that there are different ways of knowing whether you should do it in a qualitative way or a quantitative way or in a mixed way. One is to read yourself and find out what kind of demands a qualitative inquiry or a quantitative inquiry or a mixed methods inquiry. Read and find out. This is one hard way which will take a lot of time to find out, but you can find out that way. Another way is to talk about the problem you have to somebody who has already published, or somebody who is familiar with this, somebody who has training in research methodology. Ask such people or put that question on a platform like ELTA India, which we have a lot of researchers in that platform. Put it there, say that this is what I want to work on, what kind of approach will be suitable for my study. So somebody will come up and help you, definitely. So more or less these are the two ways you have.
All right, but yeah, for a self-learning material, are there some books so that I can define, so that I can know that my problem must be through this way? Are there some books for references?
See, if you read if you read about approaches to research, if you look at something like qualitative research, quantitative research, and mixed methods research, basic things, if you look at and read about them, you will immediately know whether your question requires a qualitative approach or a quantitative approach or a mixed methods approach. It will require some time, but you can read and master it, and once you master it, it will remain with you. So it's a huge reward if you can go the hard way.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Right. We can take one more question.